Seriously? I muttered, slamming the book shut. That's how it ends? The novel, The Serpent's Bride, a supposedly epic fantasy romance, had just concluded with the heroine tragically dying, the charming villain getting away with everything, and the stoic, actually good guy left alone and heartbroken. It was infuriating. I, Evelyn Hartwell, was not a fan of tragic endings, or manipulative villains masquerading as romantic interests, or heroines who lacked the common sense of a gnat. I tossed the book onto my nightstand where it landed with a loud thud. I was a software engineer, for crying out loud. I believed in logic, in solutions, in fixing things. And this ending? This ending needed fixing. I was a practical person. I liked order, predictability, and a good, strong cup of coffee. I didn't believe in fate or destiny or any of that romantic nonsense. I believed in making your own luck, in taking control of your own life, which is probably why the novel's ending irritated me so much. It was all so passive, so needlessly tragic. If I were in that story, I grumbled to my empty apartment, I'd rewrite the whole damn thing. I switched off the light, pulling the covers up to my chin. I'd save the good guys, expose the villains, and definitely wouldn't die in a stupid fire. I closed my eyes, a wave of frustration washing over me. I'd give that story a proper ending. My last thought, before sleep claimed me, was a childish, almost petulant wish. I wish I could just fix it. The next sensation was cold. A hard, unforgiving surface beneath my back, a damp chill in the air. Not my comfy memory foam mattress, not my cozy apartment. I opened my eyes, blinking against the dim light. I was lying on a stone floor in a room that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle, or, a fantasy novel. Panic flared. Where was I? Had I been drugged? Kidnapped? This wasn't funny. I tried to sit up, and that's when I realized something was seriously wrong. My body felt wrong, smaller, weaker. I looked down at my hands, and my breath caught in my throat. They were the hands of a child, small, delicate, with delicate fingernails. Definitely not my hands. I scrambled to my feet, my legs wobbly and unsteady, and stumbled towards a mirror hanging on the wall. The reflection that stared back at me was a stranger, a young woman with wide, frightened eyes and a tangle of dark, curly hair. She was wearing a simple but well-made linen dress. What the? I whispered, my voice a high-pitched squeak that made me cringe. It was impossible, insane. But as I stared at the reflection, at the unfamiliar room, at the everything, a terrifying, exhilarating realization dawned on me. The novel. The Serpent's Bride. The world, the setting, the characters. It was all here. I was in the novel, and I was reborn. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. I remembered the ending, the frustration, the wish. Had that done this? Had I somehow wished myself into the story? And if so, which character was I? I certainly didn't feel like the tragically doomed heroine. The memories came in a rush, a jumble of images and emotions that weren't my own, yet somehow were. I was Evelyn, yes, but not Evelyn Hartwell of 21st century Earth. I was Evelyn, something, an orphan. My father, a knight, apparently had died recently, leaving me with nothing but debts. Debts, great. Just what I needed. A new life in a fantasy world, and I'm starting in the red. The room, I realized, was a small but comfortable chamber in what appeared to be a large manor house. It was furnished simply but elegantly, with a four-poster bed, a wooden chest, and a writing desk. It was far nicer than anything a penniless orphan should expect. A knock on the door startled me. "Miss Evelyn?" A male voice called out. "Are you awake?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Then, taking a deep breath, I forced myself to answer. "Yes," I said, my voice still sounding unnervingly childish. "Come in." The door opened, revealing a tall, stern-looking man in a crisp black uniform. He looked like a butler straight out of central casting. "Good morning, Miss Evelyn," he said, his voice formal and polite. "I am Mr. Henderson, the Duke's butler. I've been instructed to escort you to the dining room for breakfast." The Duke. That meant I was at the Hawthorne estate, the very heart of the story's drama, the place where the heroine's tragic fate was sealed. And I, apparently, was about to be thrown into the middle of it. I followed Mr. Henderson through a maze of corridors, my mind racing. I was expecting to be treated like a servant, a charity case, based on the novel's description of the Duke's initial interactions with other characters in my situation. But that wasn't what happened. Mr. Henderson led me not to the kitchens or some back entrance, but to a lavishly appointed dining room where a table was set with fine china and gleaming silverware. "The Duke will be with you shortly, Miss Evelyn," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "He requests that you make yourself comfortable." Comfortable? I was anything but comfortable. I was terrified, confused, and utterly out of my depth. Then Mr. Henderson dropped the bombshell. "His Grace wishes to express his deepest gratitude for your father's service," he said, his voice softening slightly. "Sir Reginald was a brave and loyal knight, and he saved the Duke's life many years ago. The Duke intends to honor that debt, Miss Evelyn. You are not here as a servant. You are a guest of the Hawthorne family." A guest? Not a scullery maid? This was not how the story was supposed to go. My carefully constructed plans of sneaking around and gathering information were already crumbling. It seemed my new life was determined to throw curveballs. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had a second chance. I could adapt. I could overcome. I could, hopefully, avoid ending up dead. Again. The Duke, when he finally appeared, was exactly as I'd pictured him from the novel. Tall, imposing, with a stern face and piercing blue eyes. He was a man used to command, to respect, to obedience. But there was also a hint of weariness in his expression, a subtle sadness that spoke of past burdens. "Miss Evelyn," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Welcome to Hawthorne Manor. I am Duke Theodore Hawthorne. I was deeply saddened to hear of your father's passing. Sir Reginald was a valiant knight and a loyal friend. I owe him a debt I can never fully repay." "Thank you, Your Grace," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to project an air of composure I definitely didn't feel. Inside, my mind was still reeling from the sheer absurdity of my situation. Then the brothers arrived, and oh boy, were they exactly as described. Damian, the elder, the heir, was a walking, talking romance novel cliché. Tall, dark, and ridiculously handsome, with a smile that could probably melt glaciers. He was also, as I well knew, a possessive, controlling, manipulative jerk with a cruel streak a mile wide. He immediately zeroed in on me, his eyes raking over me with a blatant appraisal that made my skin crawl. "And you must be Miss Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth and charming, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. My father has told me so much about your father's bravery." The emphasis on bravery felt subtly condescending, as if my father's sacrifice was merely a convenient stepping stone for my own social advancement. "The pleasure is all mine, Lord Damian," I replied, forcing a polite smile, subtly pulling my hand away. Then there was Elias. He was younger, slighter, with a quiet, almost shy demeanor. He had kind eyes, a gentle smile, and a nervous habit of pushing his unruly brown hair out of his face. He was everything his brother wasn't. And he was, according to the novel, destined for a life of quiet misery, overshadowed and bullied by Damian. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Evelyn," he said, his voice soft, his gaze flickering towards me, then quickly away. Damian, predictably, cut him off. "Elias, don't bore Miss Evelyn with your awkwardness. She's clearly accustomed to more stimulating company." I saw Elias flinch, a flicker of pain crossing his face, and something inside me, something fierce and protective, ignited. "Actually, Lord Damian," I said, my voice surprisingly firm, "I find kindness and sincerity far more stimulating than empty flattery." Damian's smile faltered. Elias looked up, surprised, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. The Duke, who had been observing the exchange with a stoic expression, raised a single eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his gaze. "This time," I thought, hardening my resolve, "I will take control of my own story. I wouldn't be a pawn, a victim, a tragically doomed heroine. I would be the author of my own fate. The garden tea that afternoon was a masterclass in subtle power dynamics. Damien, predictably, tried to monopolize my attention, showering me with compliments, asking leading questions, trying to steer the conversation towards our supposed future together. He kept calling me my lady, emphasizing a closeness that in reality was non existent. My lady, would you care for more tea? My lady, you must tell me all about your interests. Elias, meanwhile, remained mostly silent, observing the scene with a quiet sadness that tugged at my heartstrings. I, however, had my own agenda. I deliberately engaged Elias in conversation, asking him about his interests, his studies, his hopes for the future. I drew him out, encouraged him to speak, to share his thoughts. I hear you enjoy painting, Lord Elias, I said, turning to him with a genuine smile. I'd love to see some of your work sometime. His eyes widened, surprised and a little flustered. Oh, it's nothing special, really, he stammered. Just a hobby. Nonsense, Elias, Damian interjected, his voice laced with condescension. Show Miss Evelyn your scribbles. She might find them amusing. I shot Damian a sharp look, then turned back to Elias, my expression softening. I'm sure they're wonderful, I said. I believe true art comes from the heart, not from social expectations. Elias blushed, but a small smile played on his lips. He met my gaze, and for a moment I saw a spark of hope, of defiance in his eyes. The Hawthorne estate, as I explored it over the next few days, was both familiar and strangely alien. I recognized the grand ballroom, the sprawling gardens, the imposing library, all described in painstaking detail in the novel, but there were also differences, subtle nuances that reminded me this was a real place, not just a fictional setting. One evening, I found myself wandering through the gardens, drawn by a faint, ethereal glow emanating from a secluded grove. The air hummed with a strange energy, a tingling sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. And then I saw it, a small, shimmering creature, hovering just above the ground, its body composed of what looked like swirling earth and glowing moss. It had large, luminous eyes and delicate leaf-like wings. It was a spirit, an earth spirit to be precise. And according to the novel's lore, they were incredibly rare, incredibly powerful, and incredibly real. I froze, unsure of what to do. In the novel, only those with strong magical abilities could see or interact with spirits. Was this me? Did I have magic? The spirit, sensing my presence, turned towards me. Its eyes, filled with an ancient wisdom, met mine. Hello, I whispered, my voice trembling. The spirit didn't speak, but I felt a connection, a sense of warmth and understanding that flowed from it to me. Then it extended a tiny glowing hand as if beckoning me closer. Hesitantly, I reached out, my fingers brushing against its shimmering form. A jolt of energy surged through me, a feeling of connection to the earth, to nature, to something ancient and powerful. And then I heard a voice, not in my ears, but in my mind. Evelyn, it whispered, the sound like the rustling of leaves, the murmur of a stream. You have awakened. The spirit, I learned, was named Riven. He was a guardian of the grove, a being of pure earth magic, and he had chosen me. Over the next few weeks, Riven became my guide, my teacher, my confidant. He taught me about the magic that flowed through this world, the magic that now flowed through me. He explained that I had a natural affinity for earth magic, a connection to the land, to the plants, to the very essence of life. You have a strong spirit, Evelyn, Riven said, his voice a gentle whisper in my mind. A resilience that is rare. You have the potential for great power. But I don't understand, I said. Why me? I'm just an ordinary girl. You are anything but ordinary, Evelyn, Riven replied. You have been given a second chance. A chance to change your fate and the fate of others. Do not waste it. His words resonated with me, echoing the vow I'd made upon awakening in this new world. I had a purpose, a mission, and now I had the power to fulfill it, the power of knowledge, the power of magic, and the power of a second chance. And I wouldn't let it go to waste. Elias became an unexpected sanctuary in the increasingly complex game I was playing. He was the antithesis of everything I'd come to despise: the arrogance, the manipulation, the ruthless ambition. He was kind, a gentle soul trapped in a gilded cage, much like I had been. I started seeking him out, finding excuses to spend time with him. I'd find him in the library, poring over ancient texts, or in the gardens, sketching the intricate patterns of flowers, or in the neglected music room, hesitantly picking out melodies on a dusty piano. "You have a real talent, Ellis," I said one afternoon as I watched him sketch a particularly beautiful rose. He'd been startled by my entrance, quickly trying to hide his drawing. "It's nothing," he mumbled, his cheeks flushing. "Just a hobby." "It's not nothing," I insisted. "It's beautiful. You have a real eye for detail, for capturing the essence of things." He looked at me, surprised, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You, you really think so?" "I do," I said, smiling. "Have you ever considered pursuing it further, taking lessons perhaps?" He shook his head. "Damian says it's a waste of time, that I should be focusing on more important things, preparing to take over the estate." "And what do you want, Elias?" I asked, my voice soft but firm. "What makes you happy?" He hesitated, then looked down at his drawing, his fingers tracing the delicate lines of the rose. I I love creating," he admitted. "I love capturing beauty, expressing myself through art. But, but Damien wouldn't approve," I finished for him. He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Elias," I said, placing a hand on his arm, "you don't have to live your life according to Damien's expectations. You have your own path, your own talents. You should follow them." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and doubt. "It's not that easy, Evelyn," he said. He's always been in charge. He's always been the strong one." "Strength comes in many forms, Elias," I said. "And sometimes the greatest strength is the courage to be yourself." Our conversations became a regular occurrence. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his dreams, his fears, his frustrations with his brother's overbearing nature. I, in turn, shared my own carefully edited experiences, my own struggles to find my place in the world. I encouraged him to stand up to Damian, to assert himself, to pursue his own passions. I helped him sneak away to art lessons in the nearby village. I defended him against Damian's taunts. I became his confidant, his friend, his ally. And then she arrived. Jane Montgomery, the heroine of the original novel, the sweet, innocent, tragically doomed love interest. She arrived at the Hawthorne estate with all the fanfare befitting a future duchess. Carriages, servants, trunks overflowing with expensive clothes. It was a spectacle. I watched her arrival from a window, my heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Delicate features, a shy smile, an air of gentle innocence that was almost painful to witness. She was everything I wasn't, and she was walking straight into a trap. Damian, predictably, played the part of the devoted fiancé to perfection. He showered her with attention, with gifts, with empty promises of a fairy tale future. He was charming, attentive, and utterly insincere. I observed Jane closely, looking for any sign of awareness, any hint that she saw through his facade. But there was nothing. She seemed genuinely smitten, completely oblivious to the danger she was in. She was kind, I'll give her that. She treated the servants with respect. She spoke to Elias with genuine warmth. And she even tried to befriend me. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Evelyn," she said, her voice soft and hesitant, during our first formal introduction. "Damian has told me so much about you." "Has he?" I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "Yes," she said, smiling shyly. "He says you're very clever and very independent." The way she said independent made it sound like a slightly scandalous character flaw. I decided to start subtly, to plant seeds of doubt, to nudge her towards the truth without revealing my own impossible knowledge. "Damian is a very charming man, Miss Montgomery," I said during a walkabout through the gardens. "But charm can be deceiving." She looked at me, her brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, choosing my words carefully, "that it's important to look beyond the surface, to see the true person beneath the mask." She hesitated, then said, Damian has been nothing but kind to me. He's he's everything a woman could want in a husband. Is he? I challenged gently. Or is he everything society tells you a woman should want in a husband? The question hung in the air, unanswered. I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the first crack in her carefully constructed facade of blissful ignorance. But it wasn't enough. She was too deeply entrenched in the narrative, too blinded by the fairy tale romance she'd been promised. So I decided to be more direct. I found her alone one evening in the library, reading a book of poetry. She looked lost, unhappy. Miss Montgomery, I said, my voice soft but firm, we need to talk. She looked up, startled. Evelyn, what is it? It's about Damian, I said, cutting straight to the chase. He's not who you think he is. He's dangerous. She laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. Don't be ridiculous, Evelyn. Damian is a perfect gentleman. He's a manipulator, Miss Montgomery, I said, my voice unwavering. He's using you. He's using your family. He's using everyone. I don't believe you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You're just jealous. Jealous? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I have no reason to be jealous of you, Miss Montgomery. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to warn you. Warn me about what? She challenged, her eyes flashing with anger. Warn me about the man I'm going to marry? The man who loves me? He doesn't love you, Miss Montgomery, I said, my voice softening. He loves what you represent. Your social standing, your family's wealth, your innocence. He's using you as a pawn in his own twisted game. I saw the flicker of doubt again, stronger this time, but she quickly suppressed it, clinging to her denial like a lifeline. You're wrong, she said, her voice shaking. You're wrong about him. You're just trying to ruin things for me. I'm trying to save you, Miss Montgomery, I said, my voice filled with a desperate urgency. Please, you need to listen to me before it's too late. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear, anger, and a flicker of something else. Something that looked like hope. But then, the moment was broken. Damian appeared in the doorway, his smile charming, his eyes cold. There you are, my love, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I've been looking for you. He looked at me, his expression hardening. Miss Stone, I trust you weren't bothering my fiancé. Just having a friendly chat, Lord Damian, I replied, my voice equally smooth, discussing the joys of wedding planning. He didn't believe me, of course, but he couldn't prove anything. He simply offered his arm to Jane, his grip on her possessive, almost threatening. Come, my dear, he said, his voice laced with a subtle warning. Let's leave Miss Stone to her thoughts. And as I watched them walk away, I knew that I had failed. For now, Jane was still trapped, still blinded by Damian's lies, but I wouldn't give up. I would find a way to save her, to expose him, to change the tragic ending that awaited her, even if it meant risking everything. The game had changed, and I was determined to win, not just for myself, but for everyone who deserved a better fate. The arrival of Jeremiah, the scholar from the arcane tower, was a turning point, though I didn't realize it at the time. He was ostensibly there to assess Elias's magical potential, a routine examination conducted on all noble children of a certain age. In the original story, of course, Elias was deemed to have no discernible talent, a judgment that further fueled Damian's contempt and solidified Elias's sense of inadequacy. I, however, knew better. And I also knew that Jeremiah was more than just a scholar. He was a wise, insightful man with a deep understanding of magic and a keen eye for hidden potential. He was older, with a neatly trimmed white beard and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. He wore the simple, unadorned robes of the arcane tower, a stark contrast to the opulent attire of the Hawthorne household. So you're the young Lord Elias, Jeremiah said, his voice a gentle rumble, as he observed Elias attempting a simple levitation spell. The feather, as expected, remained stubbornly grounded. Elias flushed, his shoulders slumping. I'm not very good at it, he mumbled. Damian, of course, couldn't resist a jab. He has no aptitude for magic, Master Jeremiah, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. It's a waste of your time. Jeremiah ignored Damian, his gaze shifting to me. I'd been standing quietly in the corner of the room, observing the scene, trying to remain inconspicuous. And you, young lady, he said, his eyes twinkling, are you also a student of magic? I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. I'm learning, I said vaguely. Indeed, he said, raising an eyebrow. And what branch of magic are you studying? Earth magic, I replied, my voice gaining confidence. I have a connection to the land. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze intense and perceptive. Then he smiled. I sense great potential in you, Miss Stone, he said, a potential that goes far beyond what you currently understand. And that's how my formal training began. Jeremiah, recognizing my innate ability and my unusual knowledge, which I carefully attributed to extensive reading, agreed to become my mentor. He saw in me not just a student, but a kindred spirit, someone who shared his passion for knowledge and his belief in the power of magic to do good. Our lessons were held in secret, in the neglected greenhouse at the edge of the estate. It was a perfect place, filled with the scent of earth and growing things, a sanctuary where I could explore my abilities without fear of judgment or ridicule. Jeremiah taught me the fundamentals of magic, the principles of energy manipulation, the intricacies of spell casting, the importance of discipline and control. But he also encouraged me to experiment, to explore my own unique connection to the earth. Magic is not just about following rules, Evelyn, he said one afternoon as we were practicing a simple healing spell. It's about intuition, about connection, about understanding the flow of energy that permeates all living things. And that's when the idea for the rose elixir came to me. It was a combination of my modern knowledge of chemistry and pharmacology and my newfound understanding of earth magic. I remembered reading about the medicinal properties of various plants, about the ancient art of alchemy, about the power of combining natural ingredients to create potent remedies. I started experimenting, using the herbs and flowers from the greenhouse, combining them in different ways, infusing them with my own magical energy. It was a process of trial and error, of successes and failures, of learning to listen to the whispers of the earth, to understand the subtle language of plants. Finally, after weeks of experimentation, I created it, the rose elixir. It was a simple potion made from a combination of rose petals, chamomile, and a few other secret ingredients, infused with my own earth magic. It was a pain reliever, a powerful anti-inflammatory, and a surprisingly effective healing agent. I tested it first on myself, on a minor cut I'd gotten while pruning the rose bushes. The pain vanished almost instantly, and the wound healed with remarkable speed. Then, I gave it to Elias, who suffered from chronic headaches. He was skeptical at first, but after taking a single dose, his pain disappeared, replaced by a look of amazed relief. Evelyn, he said, his voice filled with wonder, this is incredible. What is it? It's just a little something I've been working on, I replied, smiling. I call it the rose elixir. Word of the elixir spread quickly throughout the estate. Servants with aching joints, gardeners with cuts and bruises, even the Duke himself, suffering from a bout of gout, all experienced the remarkable healing properties of my creation. And that's when the whispers started. Whispers of a miracle cure, of a gifted healer, of a young woman with extraordinary abilities. I started receiving requests from people in the nearby village, then from neighboring estates, then from everywhere. People were desperate for relief from pain, for healing, for hope. And I realized I had stumbled upon something truly significant, something that could change lives. I started producing the elixir in larger quantities, using the greenhouse as my laboratory. Riven, my ever-present companion and assistant. I sold it at a modest price, ensuring that it was accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy elite. Carter's Elixirs, I wasn't particularly creative with names, was born. It was a small business at first, just a local enterprise. But it was mine. It was a testament to my ingenuity, my independence, my ability to create something positive, something meaningful in this new world. The success of the elixir, of course, attracted attention. Positive attention from the people whose lives I'd touched, from the grateful patients who had found relief from their suffering. But it also attracted negative attention from the jealous rivals, from the skeptical scholars, from the greedy eyes of those who saw only profit, not healing. Damian, predictably, was furious. He saw my success as a threat, a challenge to his own authority. He couldn't understand how a mere girl, an orphan with no social standing, could achieve something he, the heir to the Hawthorne estate, could not. "You're getting above yourself, Evelyn," he sneered one evening as he cornered me in the hallway. "You're just a commoner playing with potions. You need to remember your place." "My place, Lord Damian," I replied, my voice calm and steady, "is wherever I choose to be. And right now, I choose to be here, helping people, using my talents to make a difference." His face turned red with anger. He opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off. "And if you'll excuse me, Lord Damian," I said, my voice laced with a subtle hint of steel, "I have work to do." I walked away, leaving him fuming, his arrogance deflated, his authority challenged. The game, as always, was evolving. And I, the reborn orphan, the unexpected entrepreneur, the unlikely healer, was starting to win, not through brute force or manipulation, but through ingenuity, compassion, and a touch of magic. My success with the rose elixir, while gratifying, had the unfortunate side effect of intensifying Damian's unwanted attentions. He'd always been drawn to me, a predatory glint in his eye that spoke of possession, not affection. But now, with my newfound independence and growing influence, I was no longer just a pretty distraction. I was a challenge, a prize to be won, a conquest to be added to his list of accomplishments. His attempts to control me became more blatant, more suffocating. He'd suggest I spend less time on my little hobby and more time with him. He'd advise me on whom I should associate with, subtly and not so subtly discouraging my friendship with Elias. He'd even started interfering with my business, trying to pressure me into selling the elixir exclusively to his wealthy contacts at an exorbitant price. "You have a real talent, Evelyn," he said one afternoon as he cornered me in the library. He'd accidentally dismissed the servants, leaving us alone. "But you need guidance. You need someone to help you reach your full potential." "I'm doing just fine on my own, Lord Damian," I replied, my voice cool and distant. I kept a stack of books between us, a physical barrier against his encroaching presence. "Nonsense," he said, dismissing my words with a wave of his hand. "A woman like you needs a powerful man to protect her, to guide her, to appreciate her." His gaze lingered on me, a possessive, almost lecherous look that made my skin crawl. "I appreciate your concern, Lord Damian," I said, forcing a polite smile. "But I assure you, I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs." "Are you?" he challenged, his voice dropping to a low, seductive murmur. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer to share your burdens? To have a man like me take care of you?" I took a step back, maintaining eye contact, refusing to show any fear. "I prefer to rely on myself, Lord Damian," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm quite content with my burdens, as you call them." His smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of anger. "You're playing a dangerous game, Evelyn," he said, his voice hardening. "You're defying me, and that's not something I tolerate." "I'm not playing any games, Lord Damian," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I'm simply living my life, on my own terms." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and something else. Something that looked almost like admiration. Then he abruptly turned and walked away, leaving me shaken but resolute. I knew this wasn't over. He wouldn't give up so easily, and that's why I needed to be prepared. I knew from the novel that Damian was planning to use me, to seduce me, to make me his mistress, to discard Jane once he secured his position as heir. He saw me as a pawn in his game, a means to an end. But I wasn't a pawn, and I refused to be used. I needed proof. Evidence of his true intentions, something undeniable that I could present to the Duke. That's when I remembered the enchanted mirror. It was an old, forgotten artifact tucked away in a dusty corner of the library. Jeremiah had shown it to me, explaining its properties. It could record conversations, capture images, replay events. It was a magical recording device, perfect for my purposes. I spent days perfecting a spell, a subtle enchantment that would activate the mirror remotely, allowing me to record Damian's conversations without his knowledge. It was a risky maneuver, but I was confident in my abilities. I placed the mirror in Damian's study, hidden behind a tapestry, its surface disguised as an ordinary piece of decoration. And then I waited. I baited the trap, subtly provoking Damian, challenging his authority, playing on his arrogance and his desire to control me. I knew he would eventually reveal his true colors, and when he did, the mirror would be there to capture it. And I was right. A few days later, I overheard him talking to one of his cronies, a sycophantic nobleman who catered to Damian's every whim. "She's resisting, of course," Damian was saying, his voice laced with irritation. "But she'll come around. They always do. A few gifts, a few promises, a little pressure, and she'll be mine." "And what about the Montgomery girl?" the crony asked. "Jane?" Damian scoffed. "She's a means to an end. Once I secure my position as heir, once I have control of the estate, I'll find a way to get rid of her. A convenient accident, perhaps. Or a scandal. It doesn't matter. She's insignificant." "And Evelyn?" "Evelyn will be my mistress," Damian said, his voice filled with a possessive hunger. "My beautiful, intelligent, powerful mistress. She'll be my secret weapon, my hidden advantage. And she'll learn to obey me. She'll learn to enjoy it." The conversation continued, detailing Damian's plans for the future, his ruthless ambition, his utter disregard for anyone but himself. It was all there, recorded in the mirror, captured for posterity. The evidence I needed to expose him, to destroy him. I retrieved the mirror, my hands shaking with a mixture of triumph and disgust. I had him. I decided to confront Damian directly first, to give him one last chance to confess, to redeem himself. It was a foolish, perhaps naive impulse, but I couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity for him. He was a monster, yes, but he was also a product of his upbringing, of a society that valued power and privilege above all else. I found him in the gardens practicing his swordsmanship. He was a skilled fighter, graceful and deadly, but there was a brutality in his movements, a rage that simmered just beneath the surface. "Lord Damian," I said, my voice calm and steady, "we need to talk." He turned, his eyes narrowing. "What is it, Evelyn?" he said, his voice impatient. "Can't you see I'm busy?" "I have something you need to see," I said, holding up the mirror. He recognized it instantly, his face paled. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice rising. "It doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is what's on it." I activated the mirror, replaying the recording of his conversation. His voice, his words, filled the air, condemning him. He listened in stunned silence, his face contorting with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You spied on me?" he finally said, his voice trembling. "I protected myself," I replied, "and I protected others. You're a danger, Damian, to everyone around you." "You think you can ruin me?" he sneered, his arrogance returning. "You think the Duke will believe you over his own son?" "He'll believe the truth," I said, "and the truth is on this mirror." I turned to leave, intending to take the mirror to the Duke, but Damian, desperate and enraged, lunged at me, grabbing my arm. "You won't do this, Evelyn," he shouted. "You won't betray me." He tried to wrest the mirror from my grasp, his grip tightening painfully on my arm, and then Elias appeared. He'd heard the commotion, the raised voices, the unmistakable sound of a struggle. He saw Damian attacking me, his face contorted with rage. "Damian, stop it!" Elias shouted, rushing forward. Damian, startled, turned towards his brother, his grip on me loosening, but his anger, fueled by years of resentment and entitlement, quickly shifted its focus. "You," he snarled, turning on Elias, "you've always been jealous of me. You've always wanted what I have, and now you're siding with her against me?" He shoved Elias hard, sending him stumbling backwards. Elias tripped, falling heavily, his head striking the stone edge of a nearby fountain. He lay there, motionless, a trickle of blood staining the water. "Elias!" I screamed, rushing to his side. Damian stared at his brother's still form, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. He hadn't intended to seriously hurt him, but he had. I knelt beside Elias, checking his pulse, my hands trembling. He was alive but unconscious. "Help!" I shouted, my voice raw with panic. "Somebody help!" Servants rushed out, alerted by the commotion. The Duke arrived, his face ashen as he saw his younger son lying injured on the ground. I knew this was my chance, my moment. "He attacked him, Your Grace," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Damian attacked Elias, and I have proof." I held up the mirror, the evidence of Damian's treachery, his cruelty, his true nature, exposed for all to see. And as the Duke listened to the recording, as he saw the truth, his face hardened with a cold, unforgiving fury. The game finally was over. And Damian had lost. Not because of me, not directly, but because of his own actions, his own arrogance, his own inability to control his rage. He'd destroyed himself. And I, the reborn orphan, the unexpected player, had simply been there to witness it, to record it, and to ensure that justice, however delayed, was finally served. But my victory felt hollow, tainted by the sight of Elias's still form, by the knowledge that my actions, however justified, had led to this. The scene in the garden was chaos. Servants rushing, the Duke shouting orders, and Damian, his face a mask of shock and denial, trying to explain away his actions. But the evidence, captured in the enchanted mirror, was irrefutable. I stood before the Duke, my hands still trembling from the confrontation, Elias's unconscious form lying nearby. I held out the mirror, my voice clear and steady, despite the turmoil within me. "Your Grace," I said, "this recording contains proof of Lord Damian's intentions, his plans, and his attack on Lord Elias." The Duke took the mirror, his expression grim. He activated the replay, and Damian's voice, filled with arrogance and malice, echoed through the garden. The whispers of the servants, the gasps of horror, the sheer weight of the undeniable truth, it all pressed down on Damian, crushing him, and he tried to interrupt, to deny, to shout me down, but the Duke silenced him with a single, furious gesture. "Enough, Damian," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I will hear no more lies." He listened to the entire recording, his face growing increasingly pale, his eyes hardening with each damning revelation. When it was finished, he stood there, silent for a long moment, the weight of his son's betrayal a visible burden. "Is this true, Damian?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Did you say these things? Did you plan these atrocities?" Damian, stripped of his usual arrogance, could only stammer, his eyes darting around the garden, seeking an escape that didn't exist. "Father, I can explain," he began, his voice weak and unconvincing. "Explain!" the Duke roared, his voice echoing through the garden. "Explain how you plotted to use Miss Stone? How you planned to discard your betrothed? How you attacked your own brother?" Damian flinched, his face paling. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The Duke turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and regret. "Miss Evelyn," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you. I misjudged my own son. You have shown me the truth, and for that I am eternally grateful." He turned back to Damian, his expression hardening. "Damian," he said, his voice cold and final, "you are no longer my son. You are banished from this estate, from this family. You will leave immediately, and you will never return." The words were like a death sentence. Damian's face crumpled, his arrogance shattered, his future destroyed. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so intense it made me shiver. "You did this, Evelyn," he hissed. "You ruined me." "You ruined yourself, Damian," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I simply exposed the truth." He was escorted away, stripped of his title, his inheritance, his future. He was nothing. A fallen prince banished from his kingdom. And that left Elias. He regained consciousness slowly, his head bandaged, his body bruised. He was confused, disoriented, struggling to understand what had happened. "Damian, he stammered, looking at me with wide, questioning eyes. "It's all right, Elias," I said, kneeling beside him, taking his hand. "It's over. He's gone." The Duke explained the situation, his voice filled with a mixture of grief and relief. He told Elias about Damian's betrayal, about his banishment, and about his new status as heir. Elias initially was overwhelmed. He'd never wanted the responsibility, the pressure, the weight of the Hawthorne legacy. He'd always been content in the shadows, pursuing his own quiet passions. I don't know if I can do this, Father, he said, his voice trembling. I'm not like Damian. You're not, the Duke agreed, his voice softening. And that's precisely why you are the right choice. You have a good heart, Elias. You have compassion, integrity, a sense of justice. Those are the qualities of a true leader. I saw the doubt in Elias's eyes, the fear of failure, the weight of expectation. And I knew I had to help him. You can do this, Elias, I said, squeezing his hand. I know you can. You're stronger than you think, and you won't be alone. I'll be here every step of the way. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, seeking reassurance, seeking strength. And he found it. Over the next few weeks, I helped Elias prepare for his new role. I shared my knowledge of the novel's world, its politics, its power dynamics. I helped him understand the responsibilities that came with his title, the challenges he would face, the decisions he would have to make. But more importantly, I helped him find his own voice, his own confidence, his own inner strength. I encouraged him to embrace his passions, to pursue his art, to be true to himself. You don't have to be like Damian, Elias, I told him one evening as we were walking through the gardens. You can be a different kind of leader, a better kind. But what if I fail? He asked, his voice filled with doubt. What if I'm not strong enough? You are strong enough, Elias, I said, my voice firm, and you won't fail, because you have something Damian never had, a good heart. And that, in the end, is the greatest strength of all. He smiled, a hesitant, uncertain smile, but a smile nonetheless. And I saw, in that moment, the glimmer of the leader he could become. The decision, when it came, surprised everyone, except me. I'm going to the academy, Elias announced one morning, his voice filled with a newfound determination. The Duke was taken aback. The military academy? He asked, surprised. But you've never shown any interest in soldiering. I know, Elias said, but I need to prove myself, to learn how to lead, how to protect, how to be worthy of this responsibility. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a silent gratitude. He knew that I understood, that I supported his decision. It was a strategic move, of course. The academy would provide him with the training, the experience, the connections he needed to solidify his position as heir. It would also remove him from the immediate pressures of the court, giving him time to grow, to mature, to become the leader he was meant to be. But it was also a personal choice. It was Elias's way of forging his own path, of stepping out of his brother's shadow, of proving to himself and to the world that he was more than just the spare. The farewell was bittersweet. We stood on the steps of the Hawthorne estate, the morning sun casting long shadows across the lawn. I'll miss you, Evelyn, Elias said, his voice husky with emotion. I'll miss you too, Elias, I replied, my heart aching with a strange mixture of sadness and pride. He hesitated, then took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. When I return, he began, his voice trailing off. When you return, I finished for him, smiling, we'll see what the future holds. He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. He leaned in, as if to kiss me, then hesitated again, blushing. Instead, he gently took my hand, squeezing it tightly. Thank you, Evelyn, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. For everything. And as I watched him ride away, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun, I knew that he would return a changed man, a stronger man, a leader, and perhaps something more. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long time it was also filled with hope. And I, the reborn orphan, the unexpected catalyst, was ready to face whatever came next. Elias's absence was a palpable void in the Hawthorne estate. The halls felt quieter, the gardens less vibrant, even the sun seemed to shine a little less brightly. I missed our conversations, our shared laughter, our quiet moments of understanding. But I knew he was where he needed to be, forging his own path, becoming the man he was meant to be. And then the whispers started. Whispers of war. The neighboring kingdom of Northwood, a long-standing rival of the Empire, had launched a surprise attack on our border territories. It was a blatant act of aggression, a challenge to our sovereignty, a threat to our peace and security. The news spread like wildfire, fueling fear and uncertainty throughout the land. The Duke, despite his age, immediately began mobilizing the Empire's forces, preparing for a protracted conflict. I knew from my knowledge of the novel that this war was inevitable. It was a pivotal event in the original storyline, a catalyst for much of the drama and tragedy that followed. But this time, I was determined to influence the outcome. I couldn't fight on the front lines, of course, but I could use my resources, my influence, my knowledge to support the war effort. Carter's Elixirs, now a thriving business, shifted its focus to producing large quantities of the rose elixir, specifically for the army. I donated vast amounts of the potion to the military hospitals, knowing its healing properties would be invaluable in treating wounded soldiers. "You're doing a remarkable thing, Evelyn," Jeremiah, my magical mentor, said, his voice filled with approval. "You're using your gifts to help others, to make a real difference." "It's the least I can do," I replied. "I wish I could do more." I also used my financial resources to purchase supplies, to fund the recruitment and training of new soldiers, to support the families of those who had been called to fight. I became a symbol of hope, of resilience, of unwavering support for our troops. The whispers about me changed. I was no longer just the orphan girl or the elixir maker or even Alexander Kane's fiancée. I was Evelyn Stone, a patriot, a philanthropist, a woman who used her power and influence for the greater good. And then the news from the front lines started to trickle in. News of battles fought, of victories won, of losses mourned. And amidst the reports of bloodshed and chaos, one name began to emerge, shining like a beacon of hope: Elias Hawthorne. He wasn't just surviving the war, he was thriving. He'd distinguished himself in battle, showing a courage, a leadership, and a tactical brilliance that no one had expected. He'd rallied his troops, led daring raids, and secured crucial victories against overwhelming odds. The stories of his bravery spread throughout the Empire, fueled by grateful soldiers and awestruck witnesses. He became known as the Knight of the Silver Flame, a title earned during a particularly daring nighttime raid on an enemy encampment. Apparently, Elias had led a small band of soldiers through a treacherous mountain pass, bypassing the main enemy force and setting fire to their supply depot. The resulting blaze, visible for miles, had created chaos and confusion, allowing our troops to launch a successful counterattack. The flames illuminated the battlefield, and standing tall in sliver armor was Elias. The news of Elias's heroism reached the Hawthorne estate, filling us with a mixture of pride, relief, and a lingering fear for his safety. The Duke, visibly moved, could barely speak. He'd always underestimated his younger son, always favored the charismatic but ultimately flawed Damian. Now, Elias was proving himself to be the true heir, the worthy successor, the leader the Empire needed. And then he returned. He arrived at the Hawthorne estate not in a gilded carriage, but on horseback, his armor dusty and battle-worn, his face etched with the grim realities of war. But his eyes shone with a newfound confidence, a maturity that had transformed him from a shy, uncertain boy into a strong, resolute man. The reunion was emotional. The Duke embraced his son, tears streaming down his face. The servants cheered, the household staff wept with joy, and I stood there, my heart overflowing with a mixture of relief, pride, and a love that I could no longer deny. He saw me standing in the doorway, and a slow smile spread across his face. He walked towards me, his gaze unwavering, and took my hands in his. "Evelyn," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I'm home." "Welcome home, Elias," I replied, my voice trembling. The official recognition came swiftly. The Duke, in a grand ceremony held in the capital city, formally named Elias as his successor. It was a momentous occasion, a public declaration of Elias's worth, a symbolic passing of the torch. The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the vast hall. They saw in Elias a hero, a savior, a leader who would guide them through uncertain times. And during the ceremony, Elias did something unexpected. He turned to me, standing beside him, and took my hand. "I would not be here today," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity, "without the support, the guidance, and the unwavering belief of one extraordinary woman. Evelyn Stone, you have been my strength, my inspiration, my constant companion. You have shown me what it truly means to be a leader, to be a man of courage and compassion." He raised my hand, his gaze locking with mine. "And I am honored to call you my friend." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers deafening. I blushed, my heart pounding, feeling a surge of pride, of gratitude, of love. The friend label, I knew, was for the public, for now. But the look in his eyes, the way he held my hand, the unspoken promise that hung in the air, it told a different story. A story of a love that had blossomed in the midst of chaos, a love that would soon be revealed to the world. The game had changed again, and this time, we were playing it together. The days following Elias's official recognition as heir were a whirlwind of celebrations, ceremonies, and strategic planning sessions. The Empire was still at war, and Elias, despite his newfound status, was determined to return to the front lines. But before he left, there was something he needed to do, something he needed to say. He found me in the gardens, the same gardens where we'd shared so many conversations, where our friendship had blossomed. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. The air was filled with the scent of roses, a fragrance that would forever be linked in my mind with this moment. "Evelyn," he said, his voice hesitant, his eyes searching mine. Can we talk?" "Of course, Elias," I replied, my heart pounding. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the air, in the way he looked at me, in the unspoken tension that had been building between us for months. He led me to a small, secluded bench overlooking a tranquil pond. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle lapping of the water, the chirping of crickets, the distant sounds of the estate settling down for the night. I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice a little shaky. "I've never been good with words, especially when it comes to feelings." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a vulnerability that made my heart ache. Gone was the shy, uncertain boy I'd first met. In his place stood a man, a warrior, a leader. But beneath the newfound confidence, there was still a trace of that endearing awkwardness that had first drawn me to him. "Evelyn," he continued, taking my hand in his touch sending a shiver down my spine. You've changed my life. You believed in me when no one else did. You helped me find my strength, my purpose. You saved me." "You saved yourself, Elias," I said softly. "I just helped you see what was already there." "Perhaps," he said, smiling, "but you were the catalyst. You were the light that guided me through the darkness." He paused, taking a deep breath, his gaze locking with mine. And I've realized that I don't want to face the future without you. Not as a friend, not as an advisor, but as something more." My heart skipped a beat. I knew this was coming, but hearing the words, seeing the raw emotion in his eyes, it still took my breath away. "Evelyn," he said, his voice now firm, unwavering, "I'm in love with you. I have been for a long time, I think. Ever since that first day when you challenged my brother, when you stood up for me, when you saw me, truly saw me." Tears welled up in my eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. I'd waited so long to hear those words, to feel this connection, to know that my feelings were reciprocated. "Elias," I whispered, my voice trembling, I love you too." The words once spoken felt like a release, a liberation. All the doubts, the fears, the complexities of our past, they all melted away, replaced by the simple, undeniable truth of our love. He leaned in, his eyes searching mine, asking permission. I nodded, my heart overflowing with a tenderness I'd never thought I'd experience again. The kiss was everything. Gentle, tentative at first, then deepening, becoming more passionate, more demanding. It was a kiss that spoke of shared struggles, of unspoken desires, of a future finally within reach. We broke apart, breathless, our foreheads touching, our eyes locked. I know it's complicated, Elias said, his voice husky with emotion. My position, the war, the expectations. Nothing worth having is ever easy, Elias, I replied, smiling. And you are definitely worth it. He laughed, a joyful, carefree sound that made my heart soar. You always know what to say, Evelyn, he said. And you, my dear Elias, I replied, playfully, are finally learning to listen. We sat there for a long time, holding each other, talking, sharing our hopes and dreams for the future. We talked about the war, about the empire, about the changes we wanted to make, the reforms we wanted to implement. We talked about our families, our friends, our shared passion for creating a better world. And we talked about us, about our love, about our future, about the possibility of a life together, a life filled with happiness, with purpose, with love. It was a perfect moment, a stolen moment of peace and tranquility amidst the chaos of our lives. A moment that sealed our bond, a promise of a future that, for the first time, felt truly within reach. The reborn orphan and the hesitant heir united by a second chance and a love that defied the odds. It was a fairy tale, yes, but a fairy tale of our own making, and this time we would write the ending.